Daniel, I'm really excited about this pho we're about to have.
It's going to be delicious. I've actually never had pho before.
It's just soup. That's all it is.
I'm just going to resist every pun I can think of right now.
Okay. That would be
I'm not
pho.
going there.
Phenomenal.
No. Folks, I know you're feeling bad about subscribing to this podcast now. We've crossed that line.
We're here in this pho restaurant. Just going to enjoy a nice meal. But Daniel, last week we were talking about Jaws specifically, but this week we're going to discuss a little bit more in depth about horror films in general. Now, your first horror film you saw was what, at the age of 24? When was that?
Pretty close.
Yeah,
pretty close. I think the first one I saw was I was 22.
I fall down to my knees. Eyes are raised to the sky.
Okay.
Or 23. 23.
Yes.
23. Around that age. And it was Psycho.
Oh, you watched Psycho as
Yeah,
your first
yeah,
horror film?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
exciting.
Yeah.
And what did you think?
It was great.
Yeah, I love Psycho.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
great movie. I have a terrible relationship with that. Oh, thank you so much.
I don't think I've ever had like these kind of spring rolls. Usually,
When I was a young kid, me and my brother snuck out one night, and I'm probably would have
really?
been around 3 or 4.
Yeah.
3 or 4 years old. And the movie It was on television
wow.
about the clown who
Yeah.
kills people in the storm drains.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I've seen as an adult, and it's not good. Like, it's a bad movie. But as a kid, it scared the crap out of me. And since that time, I've always had this love-hate relationship with horror movies.
I
And
was
so
going to say clowns. I love it.
well, that as well. But I just I don't seek them out, and yet at the same time, I seem to enjoy a lot of them. So
It's that, I think that's the same for everybody.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to watch a horror film.
yeah, I don't
You
like
do.
being scared.
Yeah.
But I do root for the people to get away from the crazy killers,
Why are there 3 of these and 4 of those?
because I'm more special. Anyways, let's go back to the house and discover more. I think it's time to. I think it's time to get a bit frightened here, Daniel. This week, we're going to focus specifically on the horror film genre.
Correct.
I think we should introduce ourselves before we jump too far into this.
Let's do that.
My name is Kyle.
My name is Daniel.
That's right, and this is Assumptions, where we have 2 very different worldviews. Myself being a humanist, Daniel being a Christian, and we're just trying to make sense of that as our friendship blossoms and grows.
Beautiful.
Or just dies in a violent ember as it crushes in on itself like a black hole.
Stay tuned to next week. See what happens.
is
Will
very-
the friendship survive? It's actually the grand
That's right.
narrative of this podcast.
That's a very mixed metaphor I use, by the way. So let's talk about horror films specifically. Like we said, we watched Jaws, which is a horror film
Sure.
completely.
Okay. It's a very well, have you heard the definition closed box view of the world?
You just introduced this to me here,
Right.
Not too long ago, about this closed box view of the world, where
Right.
I do not think there's any external forces wreaking havoc inside of our world.
Right. And in Jaws, you have this external force that is outside the human world, but in the natural world.
Sure.
It's an evolution, right? This is this creature made by the world, and the humans conquer it.
Correct. And it's still within
Yes,
that
that's right.
box in of itself.
That's right. But a lot of horror films will actually say that there's, in this world that we can understand and control, there are things we can't control. Mm-hmm. So let me just ask this right away. Would you consider yourself to be, your worldview to be closed box?
I would. Yes,
Okay.
I would pretty much consider myself that we are in this together, and there's no external forces.
Right. So there's no supernatural, there's
Correct.
no God, there's no demons or forces that are doing things.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
So we're just laying that groundwork
That-
there.
that-
But this
cool.
being said, So I guess that you would say that you have an open box world. Is that what the inverse
So
of that is?
yeah, there's two ways in worldview studies. There's two ways to look at this. There's pantheist worldview, which means there's a lot of other forces out there that are equal, controllable. So you offer sacrifices to control the god of the winds, for example, and you walk through the woods terrified of the demons that are going to attack you. So that would be totally open. There's a word for I have to look it up, but I would say that this world that we see around us is not all that there is. That there is a God who created it, that there is other realities, heaven and hell, that there are demons, angels, that we're not just everything you see is explainable by everything within this world.
Got it. I assume what your question, what you're leading up to is why then am I so fascinated by the unknown?
Are you though?
I think I am.
Okay.
Yeah, I am.
Because you said in that little opening thing at lunch today that you have a love-hate relationship with horror films.
Yeah,
Okay,
in
describe that.
so much that I do not like being scared. That is not an emotion that I particularly like having.
Sure.
There's not an exhilaration that I know some people do get. There's
Right.
not that catharsis
Sure.
of having fear put into them. I don't like that. At the same time, I think what I'm drawn into is this epic battle between the terrifying and the terrified, I guess. Where it's
Okay.
like, even though I am, it's kind of like the what's that poem like? I'm totally blanking on any of the verses or the name of this poem, but it's a very famous
Is that part
one.
of the poem? Does it begin like that?
That's exactly
Okay.
how it starts off.
I'm totally blanking.
This is why I do spoken word poetry.
Yeah.
It's
Coming
just,
some
I
more
go
next
get up
week.
there and say like, and I'm just in complete silence for like 20 minutes, of how, once more into the dawn, you walk out into the field of battle, knowing that you are probably going to die,
Right.
yet still going there anyways.
Okay.
That is, I think, so fascinating to me that people would put themselves in that situation, and if they're
In
fact,
battle?
or
Okay.
again, and if we're looking specifically at
At
horror
horror,
films,
right.
there is a creature coming towards you,
Right.
and you choose to go towards it instead of running away.
Right.
That, I think, is just an engaging story in and of itself, where it's
Sure.
like majority of people are going to be like, I am not going to go towards Leatherface, the chainsaw-wielding villain.
Right.
I'm going to run away. And yes, characters run away and try and hide, but they still combat them. They still think of ways to foil their plans.
Right. Right.
Instead of just running and just keep on running.
Right. But sometimes they can't help it. I think it follows where you can't run away. It's running towards you. You just have to kind of confront it and deal with it.
Sure,
Right.
and that's what they do at the culmination of that movie. Is
Right.
like, no, we're going to lure it to
Right.
us very specifically so that we can try and kill it.
Exactly. Right. Okay, but then there are horror films that are very much so let's talk about that closed box, right? Because there are horror films, and I'd say, in contrast to Jaws, films like The Witch or It Follows, even where the horror is something that is unknown, that is clearly not confined to the here and now world of science that we can validate.
Sure, I agree with
Right?
that.
And is a lot of the fear that comes from the films, does that come from that unknown? Is that part of the
Yeah.
uneasiness that comes from that?
Yeah, it's creepy. It's because it's so unearthly
Right.
that there's no way to combat that. With a shark, you kind of know.
Sure.
Well, it's in the water. I
can
know what
read
a shark
textbooks
is.
about it.
I can read
Yeah.
up on this. If
Yeah.
it is a specific supernatural being, unless you somehow have access to the Book of Thoth or something like that, you're not going to be able to vanquish that demon necessarily.
Okay. So then, in our secular age,
Mm-hmm.
right, this age that predominantly believes in the here and now and the closed box, that's what's taught, that's what's espoused in
I do
formal
have to say
environments.
that I only very recently found out that secular was a bad word, but
Okay, like in a negative context, like
it's,
this is
it's
secular.
meant in a negative
Right,
context.
this is the
When
secular age.
When people say it's the secular age,
Right.
that's a derogatory term, not just a statement of fact. Like, this is the secular age.
Okay,
Like
okay.
the Bronze Age.
Sure.
Like, that's always how I kind of
Okay.
thought of those
I
terms
don't know
until
if it's
very recently.
negative or if it's just
Well, I would say
it's
from the Christian
cautionary.
perspective, it is very specifically
sure.
negative.
Yep. Okay. Sure. But our age is a secular age, right? Horror movies make a ton of money.
Yeah.
Why? Why is that? Why are they drawn towards that? From your perspective, you're someone who, because I would say as a Christian, it's because this closed box world is not satisfying. In the end, it doesn't make sense of all these desires, and so having films that tap into that appeal to people.
Yeah. I do have an answer to this.
Good.
However, I'm going to answer your question with a question, which
Sure.
is like the first rule never to do. Do you know many Christians who go and watch horror films?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, so I was going to say, so it's interesting
Yeah.
because I find
Oh,
that
it's
horror
fascinating.
films, at least most of the famous ones, are very clearly have a Christian worldview put inside of them.
What do you mean by that?
If we look at The Exorcist, this is very clearly a Christian
Yes.
film because they're
Catholic,
exorcising
yeah.
a demon using a Catholic priest.
Right, and that they can't do it without the Catholic priest. They
Correct.
can't do it without someone who says, no, there is a God, and there's a force more
That's
powerful, and you don't understand it.
Yeah, exactly. Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy Krueger is specifically coming from hell. Like they're acknowledging that hell is
Sure.
something that actually exists. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, same type of thing. There's vampires roaming the earth, but they are coming from the hell dimension.
Right.
There is a heaven, there is a hell. That is very clearly stated that is
Right.
something that exists. So, and I'm sure there's tons of other examples.
Right.
The witch that you mentioned
Yep.
here a while ago, that's very clearly there is a satanic ritual that happens inside of there.
Yeah.
And it's Satan himself that is trying to corrupt this family into
Yeah.
following him.
Yeah. Oh,
So-
and even if you think about it, another question.
Yeah.
Can you think of a lot of people that are filmmakers that are publicly Christian? I can think of a few,
No,
Pete Docter or
I do know Pete Docter. I mean, Mel Gibson,
Sure.
specifically Clint Eastwood, I
Sure.
know is Scorsese specifically
Sure,
Christian.
sure.
He definitely has a lot of elements in that.
The reason I ask is one of
Spielberg is Jewish.
sure. Same thing. You just throw that in the same boat there, Kyle.
Right.
But the reason I ask is Scott Derrickson
Yeah.
just directed the latest Marvel film,
Yeah.
Doctor Strange. But he is evangelical
Sure.
and very firm. He speaks at a lot of Christian events on the arts. But he is a Christian. He's known for his horror films. Like that's the genre that he's really chosen to spend most of his time in and energy in. So. Yeah, why Christians avoid it, I think there's a lot of reasons for that, but it is a fact that they do, even though...
I swear I'm going to come back to actually answering the question. But
Just avoiding it.
do you think it's because there's this belief that it is lifting up like demon free? I don't know if that's
Yeah.
the word. Or is it they don't think that it's upholding the Christian value, it's upholding the antithesis.
Totally, and it's a fascination with evil.
Yeah.
So saying that I'm fascinated by what this evil is, and I'm going to spend time thinking about it. An example, I think this is a connection, Halloween. I grew up thinking Halloween was of the devil, not to celebrate it.
Right,
It's a
right.
Christian holiday. It is the Day of the Dead, meeting All Saints' Day. And if you look at The Secular Age by Charles Taylor, he actually argues that Halloween in the medieval tradition was a chance to kind of let out those fears and deal with them. So why do Christians avoid that? And for me growing up, my parents wanted to avoid it because it was this unhealthy fear of darkness, celebration of darkness. But good horror films, I think they confront it. And so I have an interview here with Scott Derrickson, who wrote, I just mentioned those horror films. He says, in my opinion, the horror genre is the perfect genre for Christians to be involved in. It deals more overtly with the supernatural than any other genre. It tackles issues of good and evil more than any other genre. It distinguishes and articulates the essence of good and evil. And it's a genre that's not about making you feel good. It's about making you face your fears. He has another quote here. To me, the horror genre is the genre of non-denial. It's about admitting that there is evil in the world and recognizing that there is evil within us and that we're not in control and that the things that we are afraid of must be confronted in order for us to relinquish that fear.
Yeah.
What do you think of that statement?
I like that because this is going to tie into the actual answer of the
Good.
original question that you answered, which is that's partly why I think that I am drawn to horror films
Okay.
is that act of discovery and of facing one's fears.
Okay.
We've mentioned It Follows here already, and I think that's the greatest example of this is that in there, your greatest fear is literally walking towards you, and sometimes you just don't know where it's even coming from.
Right. It's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
Right.
It's an inevitability that
Sure.
your greatest fear is probably going to happen at
Right.
some time. And then what do you do when that actually arrives at your door?
Do you have a fear of death, Kyle?
I don't have a fear of death. Do I want to die? No.
Sure.
I'm not afraid of it. I am a big narcissist. My biggest fear, and we've talked about this before, is I'm afraid of dying and not being remembered.
Right.
Which is a little bit different.
Sure.
So I'm afraid that I'll have never done anything of worthwhile value, and that way I will be forgotten.
Right.
When I
Sure.
when I
Okay.
die.
No. And
So that's what I'm fearful of.
Okay, but you're not fearful of when you die, what's going to happen?
No.
No. Okay.
I pretty much have settled on the fact that when I die, I'm gone. I will kind of just like be going off to sleep and just never wake up again.
Okay.
At some point.
And what happens there doesn't
doesn't really
bother you.
matter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And if there is something, then I guess I'll have to meet my maker and plead my case at that point.
Tune in for next season. We'll talk about that.
I've got like a 10-minute stand-up set I can probably perform, and it'll be fine. So yeah, it's the same thing as there's unknown things that are already here on Earth, right?
Right.
The ocean, going back
Sure.
to Jaws, we've only mapped, I think, something like 15 or 20% of all of the oceans. Like, we actually don't really know what's at the bottom of most of our seafloor. And that actually really fascinates me. It's like, what is underneath there?
Sure.
Is there artifacts that have been lost to time? Are there creatures still that we have not yet discovered? That is completely unknown. Maybe Atlantis is still there for us to discover. Who knows? Mermaids and mermen are actual real things that we could interact with. That's probably not true. But I think that goes into the same thing. Interplanetary discovery.
Okay.
I'm a huge fan of Elon Musk and his push to go and explore and colonize Mars. That's a complete unknown, and it's scary. But it's something that I think is interesting and intriguing.
Your unknowns, then, so if I can summarize it, saying that horror films fascinate you because they deal with the fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
The unknowns in your world are unknowns within that closed box universe.
Yeah, exactly.
So things that we don't know about yet. You're not afraid of what's in those things. You want to attack it in a sense. You want just as you want to confront it and conquer it.
Yeah, in a way, it's almost counterintuitive to be afraid of the unknown, because you literally do not know what it is.
Yeah.
It's easier to be afraid of something that you can actually see, feel, smell, touch,
Right.
that sort of thing. Delving into the ocean, if we found some sort of species that was intelligent, that was trying to come up and kill us all, that's something to be afraid of.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
But
So
being afraid of darkness is not really anything to be afraid of.
okay. So then horror films that name that thing. So let's talk about The Witch, because we both seen
sure.
that.
Let's delve into that.
So The Witch, the fear of that is this demonic uncertainty. When I watched it, that's what scared the heck out of me. Is that you have no idea what's about to happen.
Yeah.
In what form, and what way will evil take the next place? Will it peck at your breast in the shape of a crow? Yeah. Will it, spit out poisoned apples? And that was what was scared the heck out of me. Is what was going to happen. Whereas, other than a horror film that's dealing with the unknown, this is now, what's happening. You know it's a witch. Yeah. It is something supernatural that's attacking this family.
Correct.
That's scary.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the same way that Michael Myers eventually becomes scary in the original Halloween movie, where he is this unstopping force that just slowly walks towards you with his knife. There's a great moment in that film where we think he's been vanquished, and we see the panting heroine in the foreground, and then he just slowly, silently gets up and starts walking towards the camera, and she doesn't know that he's coming yet. He's like, "No, just get up, go, get out of there." You don't want the ultimate thing to happen.
Right.
For The Witch,
That's
me,
our
and
new
maybe,
euphemism, by the way.
What's that?
The ultimate thing to happen that will happen.
I know. It's
Where are you
very
going to a
specific.
funeral? What happened? Oh, the ultimate thing that was going to happen.
The ultimate thing that was going to happen. Happened. Good night, everyone. Don't have some of the finger sandwiches. They're great.
What happened to Grandpa? Well, the ultimate thing.
The Witch was interesting to me in that I was also terrified in that movie, and maybe it's partly because, I grew up believing that there was a God, that I was going to be punished, and I had a lot of guilt and self-hatred, I think, because of that while growing up, and it just really creeped me out. Specifically, spoiler alert, but the moment that Black Phillip starts actually speaking and vocalizing stuff, I was just like, nah,
Why did that scare you? It scared me.
Because it is that unearthly voice and stuff like that. And up until that point, you could almost say, like, I know that there's a supernatural witch going on, but you kind of think that it's not 100% clear whether the Black Phillip story is made up or not.
Sure.
And I was starting to side. I was like, I think that she's making that up to like go against the sister. And then when you find out, no, absolutely, this is actually happening. It's like, oh gosh, that is terrible.
Right.
That is
Yeah.
awful.
Yeah.
That's
the devil right there, almost.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
he's
writ
the
large, like
personification of
completely
it.
becoming into a corporeal body at that point.
Yeah. So why does that? So if you're someone, I mean, okay, obviously there's the filmmaking magic, right? The fact
Yeah.
that they're setting this up, you're in the theater, you can't get out, unless you're like I did and you watched it in split screen on your iPad, and you could just look at Facebook.
The only way to watch a movie.
Yes.
Split screen on an iPad. When I watch a movie, this is gonna get so like hoity-toity in a moment, like so, total snob, but it is the fact that when I am watching a movie, I kind of very consciously am in that movie.
Right.
I try to avoid distractions as much as possible. I am taking it for what it's worth.
Right.
And so unless something is like breaking me out of that experience, or the movie is breaking me out of that experience, then I'm kind of in it. So I'm sympathizing or empathizing with those characters. And when that happens, it's like that's almost happening to me.
Right.
I very consciously know, like when I leave a theater, I'm still kind of in the movie for a few minutes afterwards.
Yeah.
And that's the times like walking back to your car, I'm like, oh, I've
Where is
nothing.
that creature?
Hope someone doesn't talk to me out in the shadows because I'll probably freak out like a lot.
Yeah.
Or it's like that's the moments like maybe ghosts actually are real or something like that.
So is the movie magic of this director and team making this so real, you're engaged in it. Does that let's take Black Phillip as an example. This idea that a family on the edge of this vast wood, alone in this vast wood, is being attacked by the devil in the shape of Black Phillip, but definitely witches that are real and kidnapping their children and trying to seduce them in. Yeah. So
I think it's honestly because I grew up in such a Judeo-Christian world,
right,
where that type of stuff just for whatever reason intrigues me a lot.
Okay.
Or
still does, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, as secular as you might want to try and make the world, we still have a large influence of Christian and Christianity images that pervade our culture. And so when I see stuff like that, or I watch The Exorcist, because that is pure evil that they are really battling at that point, for some reason the stakes just become a lot higher for me. And you're taking people's agency away from them. And I think maybe that's what scares me the most, is that I have these certain sets of values and morality to me, and to think that something could invade my spirit that would corrupt me to such a degree where I'm going anti-ethical to what I think humanity should be or should strive to be, really bums me out. But also
it sucks, man. It's just the worst that this happens.
You know, the ultimate thing happens and then it happens. But no, it's I think that's sometimes what we can't imagine a worse fate than being trapped in a body where something is guiding you to do something that you don't want it to do.
It's interesting that then your worldview, which is that you're in control, right? Very much is an aspect of what you like.
Yeah.
Then that's almost saying that perhaps I'm not in control, or perhaps there's an opportunity where I might not be.
It's taking away my free will, I think is what it is.
Okay,
and
interesting.
taking away my free will kind of just messes with my with how I look at myself. But how about yourself? Like, what is it that scares you about those movies? Is it just that that's what you believe in, so you know that is that could happen?
I think in The Witch, part of it is I don't like bumps in the dark.
Okay,
Could we just acknowledge that? So I think if I were to go back and rewatch The Witch, it would be a very different picture, because now I know the worst. I know what's going to happen. Then I'm going to be unnerved just by what it actually is taking place. Like just this, especially with The Witch, because you have a family that believes a lot of the things that I do believe, and the language that they're using, and their brand of theology is actually pretty similar. I think it's corrupted, but there's a lot of it is my own thing. So then seeing this family that's so upright and spiritual in that sense start to fall apart when assaulted by these very real, very evil forces in such unnerving ways. That's...
So to you, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is it for you not so much taking away your free will, but it's taking away your family unit?
No, not really. It's saying that these people that believe what I believe to be the only thing that saves, okay, they believe the gospel. They believe that they are fallen creatures that are in grace and are striving to keep themselves that way by trusting in God and trusting in Jesus, that they can't be controlled.
I
They,
should say
right?
their faith isn't enough to save them.
No, they are dead, right? Like this thing is falling apart despite that. Now, what's interesting about that film is how I've read some articles on it from different perspectives, and you see this family that's left the community, and done that according to what they
forced
think
out
is
of the community.
well, but because of their
Yeah.
brand,
Sure.
of faith. So they've gone down a certain path, forced out because of that, and willingly choose that. They say, yes, we're going to go with this. And there's a lot of just little things. There's things that the father character does that are wrong, and he won't repent from that until it's too late, as it were. There are things that the mother, just in terms of the attitude she's holding, these very small character flaws or even character choices that they make, that I think when you look at it do contribute to their undoing. But that's why that film just left me so unsettled. It wasn't like It Follows or The Exorcist or films that can, in the end, have the evil vanquished by that. Evil wins in spite of God in that film.
So to finish this discussion off, I want to discuss one of my favorite TV shows of all time, which wasn't a straight horror series, but it's Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which
I haven't seen it.
It's a drama with horror elements and a lot of comedy. If you are going to watch it, I might suggest skipping the first season, but we can talk about that after the show, after this podcast is over. Spoiler alert that I'm going to ruin a few things here, though.
Okay.
At the end of season 5, originally that was supposed to be the last season, and then it got renewed for 2 more seasons at the kind of the last minute when they weren't expecting to be. So the 5th season ends with Buffy dying. She sacrifices herself for the world, and she's killed. Straight up, she's dead.
Yeah.
So the 6th season starts, and so what do you do at that point?
Sure.
Your main character is dead.
Yeah.
And there's some spells that happen, and they resurrect her. They bring her
Right.
back, and she is now back in her own body, and she's alive.
Oh, wow.
Now, a lot of people really hate the 6th season. And I'm one of the few people that is a Buffy fan that loves the 6th
Why is
season a
that?
lot.
Because the resurrection's real.
It's a different tone for sure that season. It's a very, very different tone that they settle in on. But it's a very specific reason I find is that it's a lot more depressing and dour. But it's because she finally verbalizes it. I think it's episode 4. Or it's somewhere in the beginning where they believed that when they resurrected her, that she was in hell just because of the way that she sacrificed herself. That she killed herself. She's probably in hell. We're going to rescue her by resurrecting her and bringing her back. But in fact, she had actually gone to heaven. So when they resurrected her, she was actually in heaven and came back down to earth. And she says, "I'm now in hell. I was in paradise, and you brought me back to a hellish landscape."
Right.
And
Poor
so,
Lazarus.
and so it's just an interesting. And then the rest of the season kind of goes off from there with her trying to deal with that fact of she had gotten what she had always wanted, which was paradise, and has now had to face the fact that now you don't get that anymore.
Right.
And so I guess my question for you is how much you resonate with that. Is Earth the hell of heaven? Or is that maybe too simplistic of a view?
Yeah, it's. I would say it's simplistic. Hell is a real place, and where your heaven is in God's presence, where there is no evil. So the opposite of if you're saying no to God, you can't be around Him because of the wrong you've done and the rejection of Him. Then the opposite of that is hell, not being around Him. And if God is the source of all good things, then if God is not in hell, what's that going to look like? Whereas Earth is the here and now. It's the stage. It's the reckoning. It's the life that we are given. Coming back just to summarize, I think some of the things we've been talking about. For me as a Christian, the reason I find horror films something that a crack in the secular, to use I think it's Charles Taylor's phrase. So these things that show that our world actually struggles with the secular age, and there's things that don't quite fit. I think the fascination with horror and the how they tap into those desires within us is that this world and all it is isn't all there is, and that there are forces
I
of
think
good
you
and
can
evil
even-
that are above that.
I think you can bleed that into like fantasy and science fiction
Sure.
literature
Yep.
a lot more. It's
Yep.
like we want there to be more than what just
Yeah.
our lives give
Absolutely.
to us here in this case. Now, I would probably argue that that doesn't necessarily mean that every single person is yearning for a relationship with a higher power.
Sure.
That all it might mean is that we are excited to push the boundaries of human ability.
But if
or
there's-
consciousness or
Okay,
anything like that.
okay. Because even if, let's say, because your view of the unknown as these places in our solar system,
Yeah.
our universe that we haven't found yet, will that sense of longing that we have, will that be satisfied just by uncovering what we haven't uncovered yet?
No, because there's always going to be something else that we want to
Exactly.
uncover. I think
Yeah.
there's a pursuit from humanity that wants to know everything and
Right.
realizing that you can't.
Right.
And that, I think, for some people is very frustrating, and for some other people it's very invigorating. And
Sure.
for me, it's invigorating.
Why is that?
Knowing that, you know what, there's so much to this world and to our galaxy and to our understanding of how even the tiniest microscopic things work, that there's probably never going to be a time where we actually know everything.
Do you remember the movie Ida?
I do,
and white
yeah, the black and
Polish
white
film?
one. Yeah.
It's about a nun in training that basically goes off on a fling with this
Scary movie.
movie,
Yeah.
black and white, Whew, crosses, Polish,
that's right.
the worst. This nun goes off and very pretty young lady and has an affair with this saxophone player, and they're
Right.
lying in bed together, and they're discussing the future. And the nun asks, she says, "What will we do after we get married?" And he says, "Oh, start a band." She says, "What's next?" And he says, "Oh, have children." And what's next? And what's next? And what's next? And at the end of it, she realizes that's not going to satisfy.
Yeah.
That pursuit of that humanist lifestyle, St. Augustine, our hearts are restless until they rest in you, talking about God. So that these things don't satisfy. I wonder if horror films tap into that.
Yeah.
That fact that this world and all that it is doesn't satisfy. There's something else.
That's a great question. I found bath salts work really well.
Really? Okay. Okay. Well,
Yeah, what did we learn today, Daniel?
what did we learn today? I'm fascinated because I have all these in these 3 episodes so far. I'll bring something to the table that I think is one of those cracks in the secular, and being able to hear how you explain away that crack, Kyle.
I'm good at explaining away cracks.
But just how you think and how those things that obviously are a part of how we're driven end up pointing you in different directions.
I agree, and I enjoy the fact of looking at things from an alternate viewpoint, where I always kind of sort of thought that it's interesting how horror films very much recognize the existence of heaven and hell, but I never really considered the option of really they could be considered some of the most Christian films
Sure.
that are being made today.
Right.
Just because, for the simple fact that they are acknowledged, where a lot of movies do not even delve into that that topic.
Yeah. Or if they do, it's cheese.
It's very, very cheesy.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, next week, we've touched today about things that Christians hate that really shouldn't hate. And we touched about how things that fascinate our secular age because they yearn for something else. And next week, we're going to talk about a very controversial book series that I think tackles both of those.
That's right. We are going to get into the fantasy book genre kind of generally, but Harry Potter very specifically.
That's right.
So it's going to be interesting.
Just like
to
Halloween, I
delve into
did
that.
not celebrate Harry Potter growing up, but I spent the last year reading the books.
Which is
and-
weird because you look exactly like a grown-up Harry Potter. So
Well then.
I
Goes in the mirror,
let me just
examines his
scratch the
forehead.
scar in your forehead, and everything will be good. So if people want to stay in contact with us, how
Yes.
can they do that? How can they find you on the internet?
On my website, www.danielmelvillejones.com, DanielMelvill Jones.
Great. And you can find me probably the best way on Twitter, which is at the Kyle Marshall. That is Marshall with 2 L's.
Twitter is a great example of his depressing secular worldview. Read his timeline and weep.
That's right. Everything is a lie.
This world is all there is.
There is no good in the world.
I'm going to that thing that they did that is going to happen.
The ultimate thing happened.
Yeah,
And it happened.
and it happened.
Assumptions is produced by Daniel Melville Jones and Kyle Marshall. This episode edited by Kyle Marshall. The theme song used in the podcast is To the Sky, sung by the Parson Redheads, off of their album Orb Weaver. Peace in the Valley is also sung by the Parson Redheads, off of their album Yearling. It was used as the interstitials. Podcast artwork designed by Chris Taniguchi. Feedback or questions can be sent to assumptionspod@gmail.com. We can also be found on both Facebook and Twitter by searching Assumptions Podcast. One last thing, if you've enjoyed what you've heard, consider rating and leaving a review on iTunes or whatever podcast service you use. It really helps us out and allows other people to hear us. And what type of heartless person would you be if you did that? You'll hear us again in 2 weeks. Speaking of that, on the next episode of Assumptions. But let's delve into the topic at hand. And Harry Potter is this pop cultural juggernaut, if I can
What does
steal
that
a
word
phrase.
mean, juggernaut?
Well, Juggernaut is a comic book character who likes to crash through things.
Oh, really?
No, well it is,
Okay,
but I
I
don't
read
think that's.
comics.
I don't. That is true. He's an X-Men character, but I mean, I don't think that's specifically where that term came from.
Comics are influential.
I am going to guess that it's a German word of some kind,
Oh,
as everything
worst.
tend to be.
Oh.
That's next time on Assumptions.